Prior to Norwich City matches, the club organise a pre-match press conference designed to give the opportunity to hear from City's head coach Daniel Farke on a range of issues, from injuries to team selection, as well as his general thoughts ahead of whatever that match may be. Usually they are attended by local media, for example Radio Norfolk and the EDP, as well as other local media, BBC Look East, ITV Anglia, although the national media such as Sky will attend if a game is being broadcasted on telly, for example, or if it is a big occasion such as the East Anglian Derby. These press conferences are simply designed to give the media access to Daniel Farke and to provide content and quotes for their own ahead of the fixtures and across the match weekend. Chris Goreham joins us. Hello. We see sort of quotes from press conferences, Daniel Farke's snippets, but we don't often get told the backstory to them. So what exactly happens from your point of view at a press conference?
Well, I've been coming here for more years than I care to remember. It's changed a lot. But when I first started coming here, we used to go and just be invited into the manager's office, and you'd literally sit one side of the desk and he would sit the other, and there would only be really a couple of radio stations and the local paper, and that was it. And they weren't necessarily filmed. You didn't have social media, so that they would be much more informal. Now, with the extra interest that there is, often you get lots of national media here. It is in a more formal setting behind a desk with all the sponsors' logos in the background. So it's changed a lot over the years. And yeah, it's always interesting coming here before a game to find out who's injured and what other little tidbits you can find out from whoever the manager happens to be. And I know you've just seen Daniel Farke doing his pre-match press conference, and I've got to say he's one of the best to deal with that we've had over the years that I've been doing this job, certainly.
Yeah, produced some good lines in there today. In terms of managers themselves, how easy are they to form relationships with, to deal with on the whole? Are they very accessible, very helpful at these sort of things?
They tend to be. I think it's like players, really. Some of them enjoy doing the media and see it as a part of the job that they will embrace. Others don't. Others would prefer not to speak to us and would prefer to pick the team and put them out on the pitch and not really deal with the media ever. But you have to. Realistically, as a football manager, you've got to speak to local and national media increasingly as you've got the divisions before and after every single game. And I was working out the other day, I think I probably speak to Daniel Farke more than 100 times a season because I speak to him before and after every game. So that's more than I speak to a lot of my friends and family. So it's impossible not to build up some kind of rapport with them. Doesn't mean that you shy away from asking difficult questions. Sometimes you have to think very carefully about how you're going to phrase them, but thankfully that hasn't really been the case this season. It's been one of the more enjoyable seasons to cover. So yeah, I think because of that, probably Daniel Farke and I are in a good place at the moment.
And as you said, you've been to a fair few of these press conferences, and you sort of touched on it there, but your role must have changed dramatically from the very first one you did, which I would imagine would have been just radio, to now ensuring that social media are updated and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, you would go into, I think the first one I did here, I did come to one when Bruce Rioch was manager, but I came along with to sort of was shown the ropes by Roy Waller. But it was the Brian Hamilton and more the Nigel Worthington era that I started doing the job properly and more regularly. And you'd go into the office with a large tape recorder, a really heavy piece of equipment, and you would interview, and then you'd get in the car and drive it back to the office, and only then could you listen to it back, and only then would you know if you'd actually managed to record anything, which is always a relief when you have. Now I literally record the interview on an iPhone and press a couple of buttons and send it back, and somebody in the office back in the forum in Norwich can be editing it already. It's so quick. That's been one of the big changes that I've seen. But you're right, during the press conference there's a responsibility to get the news out there straight away, almost while Daniel Farke is talking. You're tapping into Twitter, getting on social media, releasing the news, and some weeks that can be quite dramatic if there's an injured player or a bit of transfer gossip. But it's been fairly quiet at the moment. We're in the unusual situation of having a fully fit squad to choose from. So in terms of big breaking news, that was a fairly tame affair today, but that's the way managers like it, I'm sure, because Norwich is set fair and everybody's fit, and we don't have that very often.
You might have to go through the archives a bit here. Is there one press conference to you that really stands out as being particularly memorable for whatever reason?
Oh, there's been a few over the years. It always depends how the team is doing at the time, and when Norwich have been struggling, these can be very terse and tense affairs, and they can last for a lot longer than what you've seen today, because managers have got more issues to address. There are some tougher questions to be asked, and they can get quite heated. Paul Lambert, Glenn Roeder, over the years, I've seen them all lose their cool at times with journalists. It comes with the territory. So, Daniel Farke today was in quite good form. And actually, one thing I've been impressed with by Daniel Farke, and not just this season, even last season when things weren't going so well for long periods, he was fairly constant. His mood hasn't changed over the almost 2 years that he's been here. And I think that's really impressive because you can imagine what it's like as a football manager when things aren't going well. The last thing you want is to sit in a room full of journalists who are pointing out to you how badly you're doing and how badly things are going. So, of course, they're going to react sometimes, and we have seen it in quite spectacular fashion. But not from Daniel Farke so far.
And just putting on your fan hat, we've got to talk about the season, haven't we? Are you optimistic now that they can finish the job and get over the finish line?
I think you have to be. I think I didn't expect this season, and because of that, it's probably been, if not the most, certainly one of the most enjoyable seasons I've ever watched as a fan, and certainly have ever had the joy of commentating on. I used that same phrase as you. I used the phrase "finish the job" with Daniel Farke in an interview a couple of weeks ago, and he pulled me up on it. He said we mustn't see it as finishing a job. We just wanted to do better than we did last season. We've done that already, so it's just a case of enjoying it, embracing it, and going on to hopefully get promotion to the Premier League. And that's one thing that has been impressive so far. I wondered whether, as we got into the run-in, you'd see the players, particularly the young players, tighten up a little bit, and maybe they would start to stagger a little bit in that final straight. But the way they have embraced it, the fact there's been no drop in the performance levels at all, I think has been really, really impressive. And let's hope it continues, because you're right, they're very nearly there. And with two home games this week against QPR and Reading, win both of those, and it's going to be within touching distance.
It must be a joy to commentate on and be around at the moment.
It definitely is, yeah. And I think as a fan, as a commentator, somebody who's watched Norwich City for the best part of 30 years, you learn to really enjoy and make the most of periods like this, because it isn't always like this, and we always have to tell ourselves that. But this season has been really, really special, and I always think it's when the team is outperforming expectations. I think the only season I can really think of that has caught the imagination quite this much was the promotion season under Paul Lambert, where you didn't expect it necessarily, and it snowballed, the momentum has gathered, and it's been really, really enjoyable. And I've loved it, and in a way don't want the season to end, but of course I do, because I want the prize at the end of it.
Fingers crossed. Chris, thank you very much. Good to speak. Joe Ferrari, Director of Communications, you're in charge of organising the press conferences. How difficult are they to organise?
Actually, they're pretty easy to organise. Most of them are predominantly attended by local press, who are very familiar with the routine and what happens. Most football coaches, unless it's their very first job at that level, are familiar with the concept of attending press conferences. So, by and large, it's usually pretty plain sailing. Obviously, if you're newsworthy for whatever reason, if you're not doing very well, or thankfully, as we are this season, doing very well, new people start coming, more people start coming, people who haven't been to Colney before, people who need directions on a very practical level, and people with a different set of questions.
And from the club's point of view, why are they so important to organise things like this to ensure managers and head coaches speak to the press?
Well, I think they are really important, and as I think you spoke to Chris Goreham earlier, the nature of them is changing, but the fact of having a press conference, I still believe, is really important. That historically, they came from a different place. So for decades, clubs have been holding press conferences before their games, usually for their local newspapers back in the day, and then 20, 30 years ago for local radio and TV stations that began to cover football more extensively. And they're a chance through those organisations for fans to hear about who was going to be in the team, what the manager thought about where the team was at any given time. And of course, in those days, the club didn't have its own media. There was no social media. So those were the only channels that fans had to find that information out. That's changed, obviously, for the things I've just mentioned. Clubs have their own media, which are extensively covering the same stuff in many cases that external media are covering, and that's another way for fans to absorb the information I talked about. And then, of course, there's social media, which has, really, really changed the landscape.
I was going to say that's a question I wanted to ask, really, about how they've changed from your very first press conference that you organised to now. It must be so different.
It is very different. So I joined in 2001. Nigel Worthington had just started full-time as manager, and the press conferences in those days were held in his office. And we used to have to cover the assistant manager Doug Livermore's desk with bits of paper to get the players he was scouting out of prying eyes. And the guys would come in, and it was very much an intimate less formal sort of chat with the manager, and then over the years, particularly as we've done better and been at the top end of the Championship, or for those years we've been in the Premier League, there became a necessity to make them more formal, to have better facilities in which to host them, and just the numbers of people attending also changed. And so, yeah, I've gone from a very informal kind of chat with a manager over a coffee, and of course no element of those press conferences was live. So it was a different feeling, because if you're being interviewed and you know it's live, it's different to being interviewed where you know it's going to be edited. You have the opportunity to say, perhaps I said that one a bit clumsily, can have another go at it. But when it's live, that's it, it's all going out. So,
what's the big difference then for a club that's in the Championship doing a press conference to one that's in the Premier League? Is it just a case that there's more national media and more national attention there?
That's a strong part of it. Another difference is that there are many more aspects of media work for clubs in the Premier League that are contractual requirements. So in the Championship, by and large, most of the work that we do with the media is discretionary. So it's up to the club and the media to agree, okay, yeah, we're going to hold press conferences. Yes, of course, you guys can come along. That's fantastic. In the Premier League, the huge amounts of money in the Premier League, and I can't stress this enough because it's sometimes overlooked, that everyone is very excited about and naturally talks about, they come principally from broadcasters and media organisations, and unsurprisingly, in return for their substantial investments into the game, they expect and contractually agree access to clubs, access to the league, and so therefore there's a stronger element in there of this bit has to be done. Whereas in the Championship it's been more like we're doing this through choice, which we're very happy to do. And for a club like Norwich, the importance of staying connected in all the different ways that we've talked about already to the supporters is paramount to us. One of the many things that contributes towards having a full stadium is a fan base that, rain or shine, feels the club is willing to stand up and talk about what's going right, or in worse times what's not going so right, and therefore we've always held them. We've always had a pre and a post match press conference in League One, in the Premier League, wherever we may be. It's just the nature, the amount of people coming. I think it's really important to acknowledge that in lean times the EDP and Radio Norfolk are always there, and they do give us coverage that we need in those dark times, as well as in the positive times, when of course loads more media suddenly appear saying, oh, this is a good story and we're really interested. So we're really appreciative of that. Another really important factor, which I think is why we really invested in the press conferences, although social media and our own channels has given us fantastic methodology to get in touch with particularly younger fans who use those channels more heavily, and to fans in other geographic areas that don't pick up the local media. A significant proportion of the fan base, the core fan base, those that will be in the ground tomorrow for QPR, are of a slightly older demographic, where usage of social media is slightly less than it is for the younger age groups. And in order to keep reaching to those people, to ensure that the messages are consistent and are going out to all of our fans, many of those fans probably do read the EDP, do listen to Radio Norfolk, and that's their preferred method of getting news about the club. So it's not enough, I think, to say, oh, great news, the club is just going to throw everything out on digital channels. It's really important to engage with the younger fans and the fans of tomorrow, but it's also important to retain those strong links with the local guys, and the press conference is an integral part of that.